Welcome to Golden Bachelor. If you love celebrity news and real entertainment updates, you're in the right place. There comes a moment in every love story where two people reach a crossroads. A moment when everything that's been building, every smile, every shared glance, every late-night conversation, suddenly feels heavier, more serious, more real. And that's exactly what happened when Cindy found herself face-to-face with the reality of Mel's feelings, or at least the version of them she could see. She never expected him to declare undying devotion. She never expected him to promise a ring, a future, or a grand romantic finale. She didn't need him to choose her over anyone else in that moment. All she wanted was something simple yet meaningful. Some sense that he was thinking about what life together might actually look like. Not a promise, not a guarantee, just awareness. Because by the time you're down to two people, the conversations naturally get deeper. You're no longer talking about favorite foods or favorite cities. You're talking about how two very different people might mesh, blend, fit, or transform each other's lives. You're imagining what it would feel like to start your mornings together, what challenges might arise, what compromises might be needed, and most importantly, whether both hearts are beating at the same pace. Cindy and Peg were completely different women. They came from different experiences, different personalities, different lives. So for Cindy, what mattered most was knowing that Mel had genuinely considered her place in his world. Not because she wanted to be chosen prematurely, but because she wanted to feel seen, understood, considered. If he wasn't thinking about those things, if he wasn't imagining how their worlds might weave together, then that meant they weren't standing on the same emotional ground. And if they weren't aligned, they weren't headed toward anything real. It wasn't about rushing into a proposal. It was about acknowledging possibility. And that was the moment where everything shifted for her. She realized that if Mel wasn't envisioning what their future could look like, if he hadn't started asking himself the tough, practical questions, then he wasn't in the place she was. She was willing to think long-term. He wasn't there yet. And if he wasn't there, then any talk of forever was still miles down the road. Then came the question she had probably been asked 100 times. Did she think he had already made his choice? She didn't hesitate. She didn't blink. She simply said, no. Because to her, his behavior told a different story. You don't spend time holding someone, kissing someone, sharing intimate emotional moments with someone, unless there is still something very real there. If he knew all along that his heart belonged to Peg, then why linger in moments that could be confusing? Why blur the lines? Why behave as though the door was still wide open? Most people, when they've already made up their mind, pull back. They become polite. They become a little more careful. They keep things warm, but not too warm. Kind, but not too connected. But that wasn't what Cindy experienced. His gestures felt genuine. His closeness felt honest. His presence felt full. And it made her believe that he was still considering both possibilities. That's the tricky thing about love. Actions often speak louder than words, and sometimes they speak too loudly. Loud enough to create hope, loud enough to create confusion, loud enough to make someone believe that everything is still possible. But love in these environments isn't always straightforward. There's pressure, scenery, fantasy, adrenaline, and the fragile excitement of being swept up in something new. It's easy to get carried away, easy to feel closer than you realize, easy to let the moment dictate your emotions. It makes people braver, but it also makes them behave in ways they may not fully understand until later. When Cindy reflected on that emotional turning point, she wasn't angry, she wasn't bitter, she wasn't pointing fingers or rewriting history. She simply acknowledged the truth. If he wasn't thinking about what life with her could look like, then they weren't truly aligned. And if they weren't aligned, then they weren't headed toward the same destination. But she also held on to another truth. If his heart had belonged to Peg all along, his behavior with her would have looked very different. The hugs would have been softer, the kisses more hesitant, the energy more distant, the connection more guarded. But that's what made it so complex. When you're standing in the final moments of a romantic journey, you want clarity, you want certainty. You want to know you're not imagining anything. You want to know the other person is thinking as deeply as you are. And when that clarity doesn't arrive, when the person across from you still feels unreadable, you begin to question everything. Cindy knew her heart. She knew what she wanted. She knew she was ready for something deeper, stronger, more rooted. She was willing to face real-life challenges, not just the glossy moments wrapped in tropical sunsets. She needed to know he was thinking that way too. And when it felt like he wasn't, that's when her path shifted. Still, she looked back on everything with grace. She never questioned the sincerity of the moments they shared. She never dismissed the connection as fake. She never diminished the tenderness they experienced. Instead, she held on to the truth that sometimes timing prevents two good people from becoming the right people. That doesn't make the moments less meaningful. It just means the story wasn't meant to end the way she once hoped. Love doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it fades quietly, like the last ember of a fire that once lit up the night. And just because it didn't turn into a forever doesn't mean it wasn't real. Cindy walked away knowing she had opened her heart honestly. She had shown up fully. She had asked for the emotional depth that any healthy partnership requires. She had allowed herself to hope, to feel, to imagine. And that takes courage. Sometimes the most romantic thing you can do is let go of someone who isn't ready for the same future you are. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away before you lose pieces of who you are. And sometimes the most beautiful part of a love story is the lesson it leaves behind. Her journey taught her that she deserves someone who doesn't just enjoy the moment with her. She deserves someone who sees her place in their life long after the moment ends. Someone who asks the deeper questions. Someone who sees the future even before the future is promised. And she knows that someday she will find exactly that. In the end, these stories remind all of us that love is unpredictable. It surprises us, challenges us, tests us, and transforms us. And even when it doesn't end with roses and forever vows, it helps us grow into someone stronger and more ready for the person who will truly understand our heart. So, wherever Cindy's journey goes next, one thing is clear. Her heart is still open, still hopeful, still ready for the kind of love that doesn't hesitate, doesn't back away, and doesn't need convincing. And maybe that love is already on its way. Until then, her story continues. Beautiful, imperfect, romantic, and real. Thanks for watching Golden Bachelor. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next big story.